The FBI finally 45 days later, locates me through a phone call that he made to his brother. And then in the middle of the night, they storm through the motorhome, grab him and grab me, and I'm, screaming and crying, and they put us in this little police van type thing, and I'm looking at the rear view mirror, and he's just looking at me and then telepathically telling me, don't tell. Zeta and Zethra, they now had names, are aliens.
Are you in Mexico at this point? Or
yes.
So you're in Mexico.
Mazatlan, Mexico.
Wow.
Is where
and you're terrified, right?
I'm terrified, and I'm terrified because we haven't finished the mission. And I'm so scared, like, what's gonna happen? Is Karen gonna go blind? Is Susan gonna be taken, my little sister?
So you didn't go to a therapist?
Oh yeah, they made me go, but I would never tell them
the truth?
Anything. Yeah. No, because I thought I would be vaporized. I mean, that was the threat to me if I didn't finish the mission. And what's being vaporized mean? Being steamed to death from the inside out?
Welcome to the Good Grief, Good God Show, hosted by Grammy nominee and Emmy award-winning hit songwriter Brad Warren of the Warren Brothers. Join Brad monthly on the first, third, and fifth Tuesdays in audio or on YouTube for raw, honest conversation about surviving things that suck. For today's episode, Brad welcomes actress, author, podcast host, and twice kidnapping survivor, Jan Broberg. Jan's story extends beyond her accomplishments in the performing arts. As a child, Jan endured the traumatic experience of being kidnapped twice by a family friend. First at the age of 12 and again at 14. Her traumatic ordeal has been widely documented in books and documentaries, most notably the hit Netflix documentary Abducted in Plain Sight. Despite the challenges she faced, Jan has emerged as a resilient and inspiring figure, using her platform to raise awareness about child abuse and to advocate for victims. I'm producer Matt Pivito. To learn more about today's guest, Brad, and the show, check the description where you'll find clickable links to access this episode's audio and video links, to connect to the show on social media, and to visit goodgriefgoodgodshow.com. There on the website, you'll be able to access the most up-to-date show information and the back catalog of episodes, plus more. Lastly, we value your feedback, so please hit that like and subscribe button. Leave us a comment or review. On the behalf of Brad's wife and executive producer, Michelle Warren, and segment producer and guest booker, Lisa Bolt, thank you for tuning in. The Good Grief, Good God Show is brought to you in loving memory of Sage Michael Warren.
Oh, this is a beautiful room. This is great. Which side do I go?
Left
Side
over there.
Okay.
Not because I'm particular, but because when we did the first
It
one,
works.
we did a Jesus Calling podcast in here, and that's how Matt wound up
What's
convincing
that
me to do this.
podcast?
So Jesus Calling has a podcast,
Really?
and when my son
And that's
died,
what it's called too?
it's called Jesus Calling, the
Okay.
podcast. Yeah, and so he saw it, and that's how. He was like, oh, we're going to do a podcast on grief. And I was definitely not going to do that. And then we kept talking and my wife informed me that we were going to do it. But anyway, when we did the Jesus Calling podcast, I could see her sniffling and crying. They were both crying and it made me cry. I'm like, oh, I'm not facing you when we do this podcast. So I'm facing this way on purpose every time.
I see.
Yeah.
This is a really comfortable chair. It's a nice size. It reminds me, my mom and dad. So I used to run, theaters, because I'm an actor, right? And in between, jobs, which is most of the time, you only book about 1 in 100 auditions that you do.
It's like songwriting, honestly. It sounds a lot like songwriting.
Yes. But I haven't ever really made it other than doing my own story. I've done projects. I mean, I'm in Hallmark movies. You can watch me. I have lots of stuff out there.
No, Michelle looks, yeah, you've been in a lot of stuff.
That's
Yeah.
nice. So anyway.
Do you know my friend Eric Close? Because he does a lot of Hallmark stuff. Eric Close, he's an actor. He's in he's in the show Nashville here, but he's was in a show called Without a Trace in CBS back 20 years ago.
I watched the show Nashville because you were telling
he was
me
the
about
mayor.
Scarlett.
Now I'm kind of feel like I'm friends with half that cast. But Eric, I was friends with long before that. So he would come over and bring. I don't know if you know Charles Eston, but he's in that show as well, and he'd bring Charles over. And
He's
Deacon.
Deacon. Oh,
Deacon.
I loved him
Yeah.
too.
We're ready when y'all are.
Yeah.
Okay. I assume that Matt's already. As soon as you walk in here, he's recording.
So we're going. Okay.
I'm being careful.
I'm good.
Jan Broberg. It's weird for me to say I'm a fan. So I know that what that may or may not sound like, but I am a fan of survivors, and you are that. And I before this was even mentioned, I had watched, my wife and I had watched a friend of the family And so the story was so interesting.
Good.
I looked it up, and then we dug back and watched Abducted in Plain Sight. And your story is fascinating and heartbreaking, and there's a lot to go into. So it's amazing. We were already very, very interested in your story, and then your assistant, I think, contacted Lisa and started the conversation about you being here. We're like, oh, absolutely, that would be fabulous. And thank you so much for coming.
I'm really glad I'm here.
I am too.
really
I think
wanted
we
to
have a lot to talk about,
Yeah.
even if it's not on here.
Yeah.
But in fact, let's just do it here. But
Okay.
for people that don't know your story, and we can conversate, I'll ask you a question in a minute if you don't mind, whatever your
My comfort level.
your comfort level of telling.
I'm an open book.
The world knows your story, so
It'd be hard to get me to shut up.
Yeah, I was
so
gonna
don't
say.
worry.
So yeah, like for someone that hasn't seen either of those things.
So I grew up in a small community, knew our neighbors, went to church every Sunday. It was a place where we felt completely safe. I have 2 younger sisters, and so 2 years apart, I was the oldest. And on our bikes, go out on a Saturday, get home at dinner time, nobody worried. And when I was about 9.5 years old, I had just met my best friend, who went through all of this with me, as well as my sisters and my parents and many other dear friends and neighbors and a lot of people that have made a huge impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, you got me crying already.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even said my story.
Mm-hmm.
And this new family moved into our neighborhood about a block away, block and a half, just down and up the street. And we met them at church, and their father complimented these cute girls and such a nice family, and invited us over. And his wife was kind of quiet but real sweet. And through these next few years, actually, we did hundreds of activities with this family. Like, his wife taught me how to paint ceramics. I still have some of the little ceramic things that I painted with her on the kitchen table at her house and his house. And their oldest son was my same age. He's the first boy that in my little diary I wrote that he held my hand when we went, and he swung me on the swings up at the park that we would ride our bikes to, that was 5 or 6 blocks away.
Wow.
And his next son, he had 4 sons and a little baby daughter. And the next 2 boys were the ages of my 2 sisters. So we just became fast friends. We had other family and friends in the area that were close enough that we would play kick the can at night. I mean, we really had that kind of a close-knit community. We were right by the university. Idaho State University was literally across the, a block away.
Neighborhood where you could walk to each other's house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we did.
Good old
or
days,
ride
yeah.
our bikes,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I had cousins that were also, my dad is an identical twin, and so my Uncle Dick and his wife Carolyn, my Aunt Carolyn, and their 5 children, 4 boys and a girl, just like the Berchtolds, 4 boys and a little baby girl. They were just a little farther up the road, and we were always playing with them as well, and so it felt like just a natural fit. And during those 2.5 years or so, we literally spent family vacations, boating trips. They had all the things that we didn't have. They had a trampoline, a boat, a snowmobile, and we just did all this fun stuff. And then he wanted to, and I went on trips to pick up furniture for the furniture store. I got $1 an hour to dust furniture at his store. At age 10 and 11, I had a little job that I could go to.
And nothing out of the ordinary at those.
Nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, looking back, can I see certain things? But no, he looked just like every other dad with 5 kids and a wife at church. Just super nice, super charming. But everybody around the area, in hindsight, is like, yeah, he was very charming, and he was always helping everybody, with different projects. And same with us. We can go into more details about all of that, but me and my sisters had this great big gigantic bedroom in the basement. And at one point he's like, do you girls want to have your own bedrooms? And we were like, yes. And he's like, well, I have all the furniture and I could give it to your mom and dad at wholesale. Why don't we do a project this summer and we'll divide all the rooms and we'll have 3 bedrooms so that you guys, anyway. So,
and do you think that was
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
all.
yeah, I mean,
Every bit of it was premeditated.
Wow.
The entire relationship and the targeting, which is the first step of grooming. The first stage of grooming is you target your victim, and you do that by looking at the next few things, like, can I build trust easily with this family? Because they groom the whole family and the child, and immediately you find a need, and the trust begins, and you fill the need, and then you isolate. You separate, you conquer, divide and conquer each member of the family, and then the sexual abuse comes in. Well, in my case, the day he picked me up from my piano lesson to take me horseback riding, because I was learning how to ride a horse, and he knew how to do that and had horses. My dad was allergic to horses, and he'd taken me and his oldest son several times. And this particular day, I don't know, Jerry couldn't go. I mean, he had a story for everything and an answer for everything. He picked me up from my piano lessons, much to the chagrin of my dad, who had started to pull away. We do too much with this family. We really need to lay off having every single activity be with them. We need our own time. We need to get back to our other family members that live in town. My mom had a sister that lived in Pocatello as well, and those were my cousins, same age as we were as well. And so it was that day when he picked me up, and all of this premeditated planning, which if you watch the series, which you have, A Friend of the Family, that's streaming on Peacock, it's a really good way to see how the story unfolded.
Yeah. Brilliantly done.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really am proud of it, and I hope the whole world watches it, because then you see how this happens. He picks me up, gives me my allergy pill, because I'm a little allergic to horses. But of course, back in the day, it was a little yellow and green capsule. I'll never forget. And he had,
had he ever given you an allergy pill before that? I wondered that when I watched.
We took allergy pills. He was the one who had the doctor up in Salt Lake, the fancy doctor, where they gave you the scratch tests on your back. He made sure that all of us girls, he's like, I mean, your girls are just sick all the time. Oh my gosh, they're runny noses, they're getting sick. He goes, I think they've got allergies. You should take them to this doctor on this day, and I can help. I can even drive them up there. And he didn't. My mother took us, and we got.
And that guy was meticulous. I mean, wow.
So premeditated. Yeah. And so for about, maybe it had been a year since we had done the scratch test and the allergy test, and they make a little potion, and that's what's in those capsules. And I've been taking our vitamins, that were supposed to help with allergies and all the things. And they did. I think they actually did. But he then emptied it and gave it to me, and it was a sleeping, some kind of a sleeping agent. So anyway, I went into a very, very deep sleep. I crawled down on the floorboard. They didn't show that in the thing, but I remember crawling down because, you sat in the front seat. You don't have a seatbelt. The heater was going. It was like October, so it started to get chilly in Pocatello, Idaho about that time. And I remember just kind of crawling down by the heater on the floor. I would do that all the time. In my own I was a tiny little thing. I'm like 60 pounds and 12 years old and years away from puberty, which didn't happen until I was 17. Almost had graduated from high school. I didn't turn 18 until the summer after high school. So at 12, I was really a tiny little girl and an innocent little girl. And I fell asleep. And the next thing that I remember was waking up in the back of a motorhome. I knew it was a motorhome. It had a partition, so I couldn't see, beyond who was driving, and it was dark. And I remember I was strapped by my wrists and my ankles on that bed, and I woke up to the sound of this high-pitched, kind of monotone, staccato type of voice. I could do it for you, but then I sound like I'm so weird. But kind of this, female companion. It was like this kind of screechy sounding voice. And
that 70s space age voice that they used for everything.
Yeah, the 70s space age. And of course, all through those 3 years beforehand, he'd taken all the kids to every science fiction type of movie. I remember watching Planet of the Apes with the whole family in the basement. And every time there was an article in the paper, black and white newspaper, everybody read the paper back then, he'd throw it on the kitchen table. I'm sitting there doing my homework as a 10-year-old and 11-year-old, and there's the little disc, and an article, and it has a headline like another UFO sighting, and he's not talking to me. He's making sure I'm seeing what he's talking to my mom about. There's been another UFO sighting. He goes, do you think this is the second coming? Do you think that Christ is about to come? That Armageddon's about to happen? I mean, he would use any key word that I had ever heard at church. Is this the end of days? Is this the last days? Maybe these people are coming from other planets and they're part of the, gathering of Israel, where the 10 tribes of Israel are supposed to get. I mean, I could go on and tell you, and based on whatever somebody else's faith is, they would be buzzwords for you too.
Yeah.
And
you're 11, so.
Yeah, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. Anyway, not talking directly to me, but making sure that all these seeds are planted. Our favorite hamburger joint, little, hometown place called the Tasty Treat, the home of the space burger, where they'd take this piece of bread and they'd cut it into a circle, and then they put, hamburger and cheese and whatever else inside, and then they'd seal the edges so it looked like a little spaceship. And that was the home of the space burger with the little aliens on the walls. I mean, that's how they decorated it. Everything was the space age around us. And so when I woke up to the sound of that voice, I was so terrified, because it had already, the grooming and all the seeds had been planted in my young, sponge-like little brain and mind, and I immediately knew that I had been kidnapped by a UFO. I mean, it's not even like, how long did it take for you to be brainwashed? I'm like, 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's really, I look
in 10
back,
years and 10 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All those years of grooming all the right things, and then just that short moment, I was completely terrified and scared and knew that that's what had happened. And I'm strapped to a bed. I fall in and out of that deep sleep. The next time, he must have had a camera somewhere that somehow, I don't know how he knew when I was asleep, because he must have put more sleeping agents in the food. Like, I'd be unstrapped, and then the voice would come on the box and it would say, get up and go, to the bathroom, and there's food. We've been watching you since you were born. Here's your favorite foods in the little cooler. And there it was, tuna fish sandwiches, Almond Joy bars, and a Squirt or Fresca or whatever that was called. I think it was called Squirt. And there it was.
I think there's one of each. Wow.
So everything that he did was to prepare me for that moment, that they had been watching me, because I was this very special girl. You're this very special child. And so as they would talk about that part, I didn't even really know what they meant, except that they kept talking about a mission. Now, of course, there's missionaries, in the church that I've grown up in, there's missionaries that go out and you talk about missions all the time, and, preaching the gospel, talking about Christ, doing the thing. And so my special mission, as they kept saying, was to have that at some point you will be having the Savior, will save our dying planet. That I'm going to, because I'm half alien and half human. I mean, this happened over many, many hours of these tapes playing
in
over
the first
about a
2 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still don't even know what that all means, but I'm supposed to have a baby to save a dying planet. The way that he, well, because I know it's him, but I didn't then. The way that he put it was like taking a familiar story, which is how brainwashing happens and master manipulators operate, and just changing one little piece of it so that it's still completely familiar and plausible. So,
and you were the little twist.
Yeah,
that
I'm
it was
the little
you, because
twist.
of course there's space aliens, and of course somebody's getting abducted. Why not me?
Right, and also the fact that my mother's name is Mary, Mary Ann.
Yeah.
And they said, your father is like Joseph, not really the father of Jesus, because the father of Jesus is God. Well, the God from our planet, your mother doesn't remember, but your mother was overcome by that and had you, and now you're going to have this baby to save the dying planet. So I'm in the middle of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, and God the Father, and I'm in the middle of that Christmas story that I've acted out, as the sheep or as Mary or whatever part I played that year, the donkey, every year as a kid, on Christmas Eve. And so I think when people think about brainwashing, they think of something that happens like it's so irrational. And how do people, I'm like, you're led down this tiny little, it's like the airplane that just 1 degree will take you to a completely different continent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. By the time it's done, if you don't course correct. That's the kind of that's the kind of tactics that master manipulators and people who groom children who are narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic, as my person was.
You can't underestimate a predator. You cannot underestimate them, because what you've already told, okay, so I've watched both of these things, and what you've already told me is so much more detail. Like, he had to be getting off on the detail of what he was doing for years. It's like the whole thing because there's way too much. You would just go commit some quick crime if you were less patient, less narcissistic. Yeah, any crime of opportunity. There's bound to be, by the way, a less stable family where he could have come in and taken some child. But no, I'm gonna worm my way into this stable family, into this normal girl, and spend years and years. I mean, holy cow.
Right.
I've literally never heard anything like the detail that this predator put into, like, coming after you specifically.
Yeah. It is interesting because to a lesser degree, I know that every time, because when we talk about the statistics of, sexual child abuse and the grooming around it and the manipulation and the fact that it's usually someone they know, it's usually a parent, or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a step parent. I mean, it's hardly ever a scary stranger. It's such a misnomer, and people don't want to look at it because they're like, well, not in my family. I'm like, I can guarantee you there's someone in your family that absolutely has done this, and they've groomed you to trust them. And you don't want to see the signs, or you just simply don't see them because they are so masterful at manipulating your emotions and your trust and how to gain that. They know you, and they know what they can and can't get away with. So even though my story is extreme in the fact that he was so premeditated and so planned out, it is a common story because
I was molested as a child in the youth group by teenagers from the youth group that my parents trusted, and they were the youth leaders. I was a little kid.
And I'll bet they were molested by somebody too.
I'm sure they probably were. Yeah. And yeah, to be honest, I don't think back then people knew how to deal with or talk about that. But I mean, we were a strict family. We didn't have a television because there were things that weren't of God on that television. And then that same house at a youth function, I was molested, and we were too holy for Charlie's Angels. It gave me some years of like, what is going on here? But so yours is extreme, and I've never seen anyone quite put it into, but it's unbelievably common.
And you probably weren't going home after your youth meetings or camp or whatever and telling your parents.
Oh, no.
Or talking about it, right?
No. My brother told my parents, and I was a little kid. I wasn't even supposed to. I was only there because they were in charge of it. And so it only happened a couple times, and they found out. And to be honest, I'm not sure that those kids aren't buried in my backyard somewhere. My dad's been dead for 20 years, so who knows what he did.
Wow.
But
Could be.
And I wouldn't put it beyond him. But I can tell you, my parents had no idea.
Yeah.
None. So it's anyway. I don't want to get too far.
Because you walk into a place of trust. If you go to a certain church, you walk in the door and you just immediately assume that everybody there is there for the same reasons you are.
I'll tell you this, my kids never went to a youth function of any kind ever. And my brother's kids, he never let them spend the night anywhere but here at my house, ever, until they were like 18 years old or 17 or whatever kind of adults, because
based on that experience.
Yep. All right. So you're in the RV. Okay. I didn't mean to.
No. It's just so, I mean, I'm so sorry what happened to you, because it does affect your life.
Sure.
For life.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to, heal, and you're healing, but it is one of the worst things that you can do is to steal a child's soul, to steal their confidence, to steal who they are, because they come and they're so alive and and then that happens, and all the guilt, the shame, the I'm worthless, I can't function, I don't know what to do. You can put on a good show, but you don't actually know, because most of the time, most children, young people, teenagers, even young adults just don't tell or talk about it. First of all, they don't think they'll be believed, and they don't think anything will happen, because most of the time nothing does.
And they think they did something wrong too.
Yeah,
I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah, on some level, because the groomer, the manipulator, makes sure they feel that way.
Yeah, I was under 10. I didn't even know. I knew something was wrong and it was bad, but I didn't know what, and I figured I'd be in trouble probably if someone found out.
Exactly.
Which
that's the common response. That's absolutely what most kids do. Yeah. They think that somehow I'm going to get in trouble, and what I'm doing I know is, or what's being done to me, I know it's wrong. It doesn't feel good, or it hurts, but they've scared me now that if I tell, or I'm just scared, period, because something that is out of order in the natural development of a person's tiny little mind and body is now, they are unsafe, and they are to blame.
Yeah.
That's how you feel. And the world is not a safe place anymore.
Yeah.
And that goes and speaks to things that happen later, how we start to self-medicate that stuff and everything else. And I'm often one that will say, if we would get to the heart of this problem, we would save ourselves from
a lot of other
problems. Yeah. And we can talk about that
later.
Anyway.
By the way, sometimes I think it didn't really have any effect. It was caught very quickly. My parents were great and they handled it really well. My dad was very adamant about, you didn't do anything wrong. And like I said, he may have
buried
chopped him up and buried him in my backyard. I don't know, but he was like a man's man about it. But the truth is, I did become a raging alcoholic and drug addict. So who knows?
That's what I say. Here are the outcomes of what happens when you mess with that person's soul, because your sexual body and your soul are so connected to one another. It is such a disruption in your natural development as a child and a teenager and into your young adult. Your brain isn't even totally developed until you're in your 25, 26 or whatever. And so if that's already been interrupted when you're 6 or 7 and you've been living with that as the background, all these other things that should have happened don't happen naturally.
Well, it kind of stops there, right? Your maturity stops in that moment.
Yeah, we talk about arrested development. We laugh about it, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's something that we are now finally starting to diagnose and say, oh, we need to figure out what's been missing from that 6-year-old or that 10-year-old's, developmental process in order to heal. This is what we need to do. But it's really relatively new that people actually are talking about these things and they are actually getting the help that they need. And the problem is that most people who have gone through any kind of incest, trafficking, rape, abuse, molestation as a child, they don't have the resources because your life is not as it would have been without that.
And most people like me don't talk about, this is something, I'm 7 or 8 years old and I don't remember that much. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to not, I don't want that. But I'm like, well, this is a platform. I didn't do anything wrong. Why would I hide that? But and kids don't know that. But I know adult men, great men that are awesome that this has happened to, and they would not let anyone else know this. And I get it, by the way. I still get it. But
of course.
My book is wide open, so it's too late, man. I'm kind of like you.
Yeah,
it's out there, baby.
And the thing is that by doing that, you open the door for other people, other men, to talk about things that they don't talk about. And the reason that I think it's so important is because you cannot fix the cancer, the sliver that's now gone so deep in you until you dig it out.
Right.
It's like saying to somebody that, well, just get over it.
Yeah, you sew up the skin and it's down there.
Just get over it, and it's like, no, it has to actually come out so that you can, and maybe that's only to one trusted person that will believe you and that will help you get the things that you need. But most of those things are beyond the resources that most survivors have.
That anyone has. It's not the thing you set up a little booth on the corner says, hey, we help molestation survivors over here, and people stand in line and wait to get in. They don't. I mean,
you were trafficked by your father and mother to all the truck drivers along that route of the thing. I mean, I have people like this in my online community, and you should hear their stories of what they've been through and how that. Yeah, do you know of Jessica Willis Fisher?
She was part of the Willis clan. She was on my podcast last season, and her father, musicians, and her father was
raping them. Let's just say the right word. I think you can do that on your podcast.
Yeah, well, you can. You say whatever the hell you want on this podcast.
Some people don't. They're like, oh, you can't say that word. But I'm like, why do we call molestation? Sounds like, I have this book I've been reading, and it's like, and he's a musician too, and it was a wrestling kind of coach that got him. And he said, what molesting somebody is like yelling at a traffic cop. He's like, can we call what happened to me in that back room after the practice by him and then older students that he'd done earlier who also joined in? Can we just call it what it is? It's called rape.
Yeah, it's rape.
Let's just actually say the words so that people can go, because that's what they need to do, so that we can get help, so that we can go to legislate and do all these things. Anyway, I have a foundation now. I have a real soapbox of what I think needs to
we'll
happen.
talk about all that. Honestly, that's why that word is hard to hear. You should be hard to hear.
Yes, it should be hard to hear.
But if it's true, it's true. Yeah. Anyway, Jessica's book is it's called Unspeakable, and I'll get that to you as well. I got a
Okay.
couple books I'm going to give to you after this.
Oh, I'd love that.
It's fascinating, but it's
because the most
you
common
would relate in the
truly
most
is a parent, which is so awful to imagine when you have children and you're like, I don't get what's gone wrong here. But it's something like 70% of all sexually abused children are abused by their father. And then the mother, she's second in line, and then a step parent or an aunt or uncle or a grandfather or grandmother.
Holy cow!
I know. I had
I did
no
not realize
idea
that
until I really started doing my research.
I knew the stepbrother, the uncle thing was up there, but I did not know that the father. Wow, that's frightening.
It's just so
That's
scary.
frightening.
It's like something's gone wrong that we don't have the respect and the I mean, I can't imagine it. I mean, I love my son so much. And I know that I've passed on some of my trauma to him, which is why I started a foundation and I help other survivors. And I want to help survivors sooner when they're younger, before they get married 4 times and divorced like me, and before they put their child through trauma. And that child of mine has outcomes of that trauma too.
But you're here.
I am.
And
that's
you're
what
there,
I'm doing.
and you're writing
Yes.
the books, and you're doing. I mean, we
doing
do.
as best I
Hey,
can.
we do what we can with what. Believe me, I have survivor's guilt. And by the way, we're in the RV. I don't want to get too far because I wanted you to do that before we.
Yeah.
I don't want everyone
And I
to hear
won't go
this
into
story.
as many details because
No.
that kind of set up the whole thing. But really,
We have all the time in the world, by the way.
Okay.
I'm no hurry. I want to hear it all, but I don't want to not hear the whole story.
Yes, of
Because I want the
course.
person that doesn't know your story to.
Yeah. So I'm in the RV. I've been kidnapped by aliens, I think. 2 days into this journey, I get the next message on the little speaker box that says, it is time. That was my Minnie Mouse watch. That was Minnie saying it's
Very cute.
12:05.
It sounded.
It's a good time to do this. No, it's a good time to do this.
It sounded like a space alien voice. I thought it was the 70s space alien voice you showed up. I'm like, maybe it is real.
That was pretty close to it. I must kind of be like, there's something comforting about this. Why would I, program that in? But that was pretty close.
It was pretty close.
Pretty
It was like,
close. I could
whoa.
just take this watch off so I don't accidentally touch it again. I don't need to be wearing it right now since we have all the time in the world. How about I put it over there?
Yeah, just in case. Everything's off on that. But
case.
just, give your guns and your phones to Lisa. No.
She's got the cabinets and she's got the wrists. She'll do it. Okay, so back to the motorhome. I know it's traveling. I've been able to at least lift my head up enough because sometimes the restraints would come off. I would eat. I would go to the bathroom, and then I would.
But
fall
you don't remember
asleep
any
again.
taking the constraints off.
No, I don't remember.
You just
him
wake
being
up and they
there,
would be off.
And they would be off. And so I remember being able to move the little curtain. It was kind of a 70s looking like cowboys and Indians kind of curtain. I remember that's what was kind of on it, and I could kind of lift my head enough to see out, and it just was empty, like desert, like no buildings or anything. I do remember that. I have very specific memories. I don't claim to remember every detail, but I have a lot of memories that have even become more focused as I've told my story, and I'm like, oh yeah, and that'll lead me to another, which is called implicit memory to explicit memory, where some other memory will lead you to, oh, I remember the smell, and now I remember we were in this restaurant where there were cliff divers, and so
Did someone walk you through that to help you navigate that to get to memories that you didn't have before?
I've actually never done something specific with memory, but I have a dear friend who that's basically what he does, because he used to be a detective. Now he teaches trauma informed, like even to all branches of the military, and he's talked a lot about how to recover memory through talking about the things that you do remember, and then talking about things that are implied or implicit, and circling back around, and then all of a sudden you actually have the memory of it. So I know there are people who specialize in that, but it just for me has just come because I've since my 20s, since I was in college, when I told my parents as much as I could at the time and wanted to, but I would just say to them at the time, when I was 16 and finally talking about everything, the icky stuff, I really don't want to talk about it. I just call it icky stuff, So back to the motorhome. So at one point the voice says, go to the front of the motorhome. It wakes me up, I'm unrestrained, and there you will meet the male companion. So it's been calling me female companion for hours and days now. And to meet the male companion and to have a baby to save the dying planet, and this is your mission, and all these things. And I'm still unclear, like I don't know what all of it means. I'm just frightened. So I get up, and the partition, which had been locked, is unlocked. So I open up the little sliding door thing or whatever it was, and I go out, and there on the little motorhome couch is laying B. We called him B, Brother B. That's what we called him. And he's there. He looks dead. He's covered in blood. He's, passed out. I mean, he's the best actor I've ever worked with, right? So, and I am so scared because I see how he looks, but I'm so relieved that it's, he's like my favorite uncle. I mean, him, his wife, his kids, they're like our best friends. And I'm just shaking him, B, wake up. And he comes to, and he's like, oh, Dolly, because he always called me Dolly by this time. He's like, Dolly, what happened? We were driving out to the horses, and all of a sudden I saw this white light, and the car just started to go out of control, and it was coming down onto the car, and the car's doing all of this, movement, and I'm just like, I got to get Dolly out of here. He goes, I must have broke the window, or I must have done something because my arm's all cut up, and he had. You find that out, after the fact, but and so he said, where are we? He's asking me. So that's a beautiful tactic that master manipulators use, is they make their victim fill in the blanks. So now I'm telling him what happened. Well, I think we've been taken, and I have a mission, and you're the male companion, I'm the female companion. I don't know what it means, but I'm supposed to, and I'm telling him. And he knows at that moment that it's completely entered my entire, body, to my soul, to my core. And if we don't do it, then Susan is like me. She's half alien and half human, and I'm bawling, and I'm trying to, get him a rag and clean up the blood. And, he just knew exactly what he was doing to completely initiate me into his club of madness.
And so then the weirdness of being with this grown man in a RV was then a relief to you instead of a strange happening.
Totally. And plus it wouldn't have even been strange because he, like I said, we'd done hundreds of activities with this family, and he would just take all the kids for ice cream. And sometimes he would just drop me off at a play practice, and then he'd take the rest of the kids somewhere. And he was like such a part of our life, and so was she, and so were their 5 kids, that it really was like waking up my favorite uncle, it was like that close of a friendship that it was a huge relief. But I don't know what being the male companion, I don't know what that even means yet. And so over the course of the next few days after he got me into Mexico, dressed me up like his son, had the boy clothes and all the stuff, and put me in the clothes because, now the aliens have said you need to, you're going to be going deeper into, a more remote place where we can work on this mission. He still hasn't raped me yet. It still hasn't happened. But as we get into across the border, and what's so interesting is he made sure that there was enough normalcy so that he could also be a victim. When we get into Mexico, it was like taking me to the little cantina where he had parked the motorhome, and where, the kids and the whatever's food and drinks, I guess, too, and giving me my first Shirley Temple and telling me what that was. And then he had a thing with the salt on it, and he said, this is called a margarita, but it has alcohol in it, so you shouldn't drink that. I said, oh, no, I don't drink alcohol. You don't either, I thought. I say these things. He goes, oh, no, it doesn't have any alcohol in mine, but that's what it would be. If, he's like doing all the things to make sure that I'm still, having fun.
While you're abducted by aliens, right?
Yeah, and so it's like that layered approach of rewards and threats and your mission, and then as it crosses into the sexual assault and violence that began with him, it was all about, oh, I don't want to do this, but first, oh, look at this cupboard, it's full of these books. And I'm not kidding. I mean, like
And the
101
RV.
positions and like books like that. Like, this is stuff I've never seen. I'm a little kid, innocent, wonderful parents, very chaste, very moral, have a whole, you don't do anything like that till you're married. I mean, it was just like, but you're like, oh, but I'm not like everybody else. And he would say, the thing is that you're special. You're half alien. So the rules from your planet aren't the same as the rules that we live by on this planet. So we could have a whole entire conversation just about brainwashing, manipulation, and how pliable a child's mind is, which is why they're no match for an adult. It's why we don't need to do more to teach kids other than to educate them in a school, like what their body parts are, what they're called, and what's okay and not okay. We
Stranger
can start
danger,
doing that.
yeah.
We don't need any of that.
Yeah.
We don't need stranger danger because it's never a stranger, hardly ever.
Yeah, almost never, right.
But we do need education. But what we really need is we have to educate the parents. All of my grooming campaign is for older teenagers into young adulthood and parents, because they're the only ones that are going to be able to mitigate that. Like, you can teach your kid not to talk to a stranger, and the minute the guy in the van, as rare as this is, shows up with a puppy that's hurt and he's got something wrapped around his leg, and does anybody know where I can get some water? You got little kids that they're not a match for that. Right. So we got to get our minds to the right things to do the right things. Anyway, sorry, I get off on tangents.
No,
because I'm very passionate about
that
this
does
subject.
become the
This is
point.
what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And so anyway, so the point is that he had all these books lined up with all these pictures with things, of course, I'd never seen before. I mean, maybe the closest thing was a health book that I remember my friend Caroline had, and we looked at the health book and all the body parts and kind of like, oh, that's, weird or whatever, like you do when you're 11 or 12 or whatever. But it was literally a health science book. It was like that kind of thing. I just, hadn't had the talk yet with my parents. I mean, other than the fact that my body's special and sacred and holy, and it's only meant for, one special person, and just don't even really know what even all of that means, other than, live a moral life, whatever. Yeah. And so as he slowly does these things where he's discovering these things along with me, then you're like, okay, so then I'm starting to get an idea about what is going to happen. And like, okay, well, I kind of know, how babies are made. And he says, well, it's a little different because you're half alien, Anyway, so it starts kind of slowly, and then it just progresses to, full on whatever. But he didn't really, just might as well tell your listeners, he didn't fully penetrate me because the hymen wasn't broken, but he was, right. Everything was happening.
Right, that's on the documentary too. Yeah, that's on the documentary.
Yeah,
which is several
times a
day. Ingeniously evil
Yeah.
thing to be able to do. Meanwhile, your parents are at home, not...
Well, the first couple of days... Well, and so that's really an interesting
Not calling
story.
the police yet. Yeah.
Well, they did call the police that very night when we didn't come home, when Gail, his wife, had come over to the house, and she's like, well, maybe we should call just to find out if there's been a car accident. But of course they're going to come home, and you know how he is. He'll go off on these, depressive episodes, which depression, again, hardly ever talked about. My parents didn't know what it meant to be manic depressive, but Gail had that term and had said it to them. They're like, well, if he goes off on one of those episodes, why would he take Jan, with him? I mean, and she said, well, he'll stop at somebody's house, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we better spend the night. And then he's like, oh, I should have called, but I didn't call. Like one time he took all the kids up to a circus and ended up with all of us, his kids and us, and we spent the night at a hotel. And I don't remember any sexual assault to me personally before the first kidnapping. But looking back on some things, like there was an experience on the trampoline where my panties and my underwear were not in the right place, and I woke up and all of his kids were sleeping, all of us on the trampoline, and he was there, and he's like, what's the matter, and I'm like, I don't know, I feel funny, I want to go inside. And I went inside, and I ended up sleeping in his bed with his wife. She was like, took me around the shoulders, and oh no, and he's like, I don't know, I could see the kids were kind of restless, so I went out there to check on him, and here's Jan. So I look back on things and I'm like, did she know? Could she have saved me? Could she have done something?
It's easy to say because you want to say yes.
Because I know there were other victims before me.
Of course there were.
Yeah, I know 2 of their names. I know who they are. And I know 4 after me because I have police reports on one of them. And the other 2 girls, they ran away when he was married to their mother.
And his family knew, which pisses me off. When I watch your documentary, his family knew that he was a predator.
I think
well,
so.
No. The brother said,
the brother
said he was a pedophile. I knew. I'm like, well.
Yeah, he was into little girls. That's how I put it in the documentary.
Yeah, he was into little girls. But then I hired him to sell cars for me. I'm like, no. So there's a lot of responsibility spread around.
Yeah.
And
so I look back on that period of time and I can go, okay, there were some, people call things red flags. I'm like, there's no such thing. I mean, maybe once in a while, something that's like a red flag waving, but really, honestly, it's like these tiny, subtle things that you might have the first thought, like, that seems a little weird or off, or my child's acting kind of funny. But what's your second thought when it's your brother-in-law or when it's your grandpa or your dad? Your second thought is, oh, don't be ridiculous. And you're
family.
So
He wouldn't do
judgmental.
that.
This is my family. This is people we know. This is silly. That's how it goes. And that's why it continues. That's why the abuse is by almost always somebody the child knows, loves, and trusts. And usually the parents do too, if it isn't the parents. So there's a lot to be done in this area. So anyway, he has all the right things in the motorhome, and the sexual assault and violence and rape, whatever you want to, tone it down, you want to call it molestation, whatever, happens all the time throughout these weeks. Mom and dad are home on, that's where we started. I kind of went off track, but they did call the police and there hadn't been any accidents reported. And so Gail's sitting there like, well, he's coming back, of course, he would never hurt Jan. They're like, well, yeah, we know that, And so another day goes by, and this is a Friday. So Thursday was the first day. Then the next day is Friday. And they're like, we haven't heard from him. We got to call somebody. So then they call the police again. And they say, well, if you think that it's something, so you don't think he'd hurt her. You think that they'll be coming back home. So we can't do anything really, but you can call the FBI up in Butte, Montana. That was the nearest office in that time to Pocatello, Idaho, and talk to them. And so they called, but they got back in the day when the voice messaging machines were new kind of thing. And they got a message and they just basically said, hey, if you really need to talk to us. Oh no, I think they called there was an office where you could call the FBI that was in town. And that office was closed. But if it's an emergency, call the FBI in Butte, Montana, because that's the main office. This is just a little intake. We'll take your whatever story down. And it was closed. And so my mom just kind of looked at my dad and she's like, well, let's call. But they were also closed and said, leave a message. And, if it's an emergency, there was another number and they didn't call the other number. They were like, okay, we'll give it another day. And Gail, of course, is begging, please don't call the police. Please don't call the FBI, because I think she
was at least an apologist, if not an enabler.
Yeah,
if not a partner.
And probably afraid.
Afraid, of course.
Had no way to make a living, had 5 kids. I mean, all the reasons people don't call. And this still happens today. There's so many reasons.
God knows what she went through with him, too.
Exactly. Right. So I have, I've forgiven, I have empathy for all of them, even for him, because maybe his story was true. Maybe he really was abused by his stepfather. I don't know. Or maybe it was just a way to exude and, get empathy. Maybe it was just a made up story. I don't know. But anyway, my choice is to let him go and to forgive, and so I can move on with my life.
That's better for you. At some point, you're punishing yourself by trying. Yeah,
that didn't happen the day after I.
That kind of resentment is like drinking poison, waiting for the other person to die.
Exactly.
It just doesn't work.
That's a really good analogy, but it takes time. I wasn't ready to do that for a number of years. Anyway, so the FBI shows up on Monday. So now I've been gone for, essentially almost 5 days, But that's when they get to the house. My dad is like going crazy. And my mom is like still like trying to, he's going to come back. And of course, we're still playing. My sisters are still playing with their kids. And they're all going to school together. She and the kids are coming to church. And so are my parents and my sisters and seeing each other at church, and life is going on while Jan is missing, and they're trying to do whatever they can. And the FBI finally 45 days later, locates me through a phone call that he made to his brother, and the number of coins that were put in the machine. It's got to be in this area, or something like that. And
very different investigating than happens now.
Yeah. And then in the middle of the night, they storm through the motorhome door I think it was really early in the morning, and grab him and grab me, and I'm, screaming and crying, and they put us in this little police van type thing, and I'm sitting between two officers in the front that are driving, and I'm looking at the rear view mirror, and he's right behind me between two other officers. So there's like 6 of us crammed into this little space, and he's just looking at me in the rear view mirror, like telepathically telling me, don't tell, Zeta and Zethra, they now had names, are aliens, they've come.
Are you in Mexico at this point? Or
Yes.
So you're in Mexico.
Mazatlan, Mexico.
Wow.
Is where they worked, the FBI, with the federales, and that's how they found me and took me and him, and they put me in a room where it was a tiny little, maybe 6 by 6 foot room, and the little floorboards had little holes that had been chewed in them, and I watched the little mice come out and run around the perimeter of the room, and I'm 12 and I don't speak Spanish at that time. I do now, and I'm up on a chair with my feet up, and I'm hungry and I'm thirsty and I need to go to the bathroom. All the basic things of life.
And you're terrified,
and
right?
I'm terrified because we haven't finished the mission. And I'm so scared, like, what's going to happen? Is Karen going to go blind? Is Susan going to be taken? My little sister? Is, Dad going to be dead? I mean, I've had all of the threats have already been implanted in my brain of what happens if I don't complete the mission. And so this little girl, who I love her and I take care of her now, and she's safe, but she's still in here. She's just watching the mice run around the perimeter of the room, and all the activity that they're coming in and out, and then they're, but anyway, so word gets home, and my mom and dad get on a plane, and they come to Mazatlan, and they come to the, it's like one of those old school prisons where it's got a big courtyard in the middle of it, and there's prison cells kind of above, and then there's prison cells that are underneath, and then in the center.
Why did they put you in a cell, by the way?
Well, I wasn't
You're a
really
little kid.
That was a little bit of a stretch in a friend of the family, because I wasn't actually in a cell. It was more of a room. He was in a cell.
A room with mice running around it in Mexico, where you can't get out, is a cell. That's just so not.
Yeah.
Anyway,
true.
whatever.
But anyway, one of the things that happened before my parents got there on like the second day is that 2 missionaries from, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? Because that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
Showed up at the jail and brought me a McDonald's hamburger and a shake, a strawberry shake, I'll never forget it, and some French fries.
They were from where?
They were missionaries in Mazatlan, Mexico. And somehow, because of how the communication can get through an organized, church like
And
ours.
did you tell them you were LDS, and they know it in advance?
Whoever did, my parents, whoever they told, we're going to Mexico to pick up Jan, whether it was the bishop at our church. And then he called, and then they called, and then they said, did they have where are the missionaries? Take that little girl some food. I don't know how the communication happened, but that's the first people who spoke English that I got food from during that 2-day experience of being in that little room.
I mean, I've had enough experience with the Mexican police, not all great, but it's a very corrupt organization. And I say it's like all of them, unfortunately.
We have a lot of corruption.
Yeah.
Don't we?
Yeah. I mean, as bad as American corruption might be, I
have
a moped incident where they were trying to take me to Mexican prison for riding a moped without my helmet in Mexico. I mean, and they really just wanted more money than I had in my pocket anyway. But that's seems extensive. Oh no, it's nothing. That's drunk idiot stuff. But you being a little girl, that's just like let's just pile that onto the. I'll be honest with you. While I'm hearing this, like just a good old fashioned uncle rape seems like it would have been half of the trauma for you. And I hate to say it like that, sounds like I'm trivializing something. I don't mean to trivialize. It's like, wow, a lot piled on. That's a lot piled on.
On top of
on top of sexual
You know,
assault. This is like
insult added to injury, or
Yeah,
however that
woof, that's a
goes.
lot.
Yeah, something. Yeah, there was a lot of trauma in my experience, and
you don't go home all okay.
oh no,
You're
but I act
terrified
like I'm
about
okay.
the
I
mission.
see my parents. They come. It's like a movie scene where we run across the courtyard of the thing, and I throw my arms around my mom. I kind of avoid my dad because before they got there, he had given one of the guards his gold wedding ring to bring me to his cell. So I came down to his cell, and he said, Zeta and Zethra came to me because that's just how it happened. They were able to get in here and tell me, that you can't talk about these 4 things. Can't talk about them, can't talk about the mission, can't talk about the relaxing pills, can't talk about, any of the the stuff that we have to do to have the baby, So, anyway, and if we do, Susan is like you, they'll take Susan, now my sister Susan, she's only 8 at this point, and Karen, if you talk to boys at school, Karen is going to end up blind, and so you can't have a relationship even with your dad, who isn't really your dad. He's just the person who's taking care of you, can't have a relationship with him. So you're talking trauma upon trauma, where my dad is my best friend. My dad was best friends with all my cousins, and everybody was my dad's best friend. Are we best friends? All the grandkids? Yes, Grandpa, we're your best friend. And that's how my dad was with his daughters. We loved our dad, and our dad was so affectionate and so awesome. And I was so lucky that I had 12 years with the parents that I had, that were such happy, such normal, such good, I had a foundation. My heart really goes out to those who are abused by a parent, because I didn't have that, and they were wonderful. And so it was that beautiful meeting of seeing them, and kind of my dad letting him kind of hug me, but I kind of didn't hug him back, and he was kind of like, okay, whatever, but they don't think he's done anything to me. He's still so ingrained in our lives that they basically go back home, get me home, and I'm terrified, like, why aren't we bringing B? They're going to hurt him. We got to get B home, it's like the beginning of this brainwashing thing that just gets deeper and deeper and deeper and
So
deeper.
what did they think he was doing?
He just told them that he couldn't come home. Like, I just kept driving. I was going through one of my depressive things, and I just kept driving the car, and all of a sudden, or somehow, I can't remember the story about why he got the motor home.
Yeah.
But there was a story. I mean, they
Yeah.
always have a story around it. And I just kept driving and thinking to myself, well, I better turn around. But I wasn't ready to turn around. And then all of a sudden, I'm in Mexico, and you guys call the FBI. And now I can't come home. Now I can't come home because they're going to throw me in a Mexican prison for the rest of my life and throw away the key. And they're going to kill me, or something. Something terrible is going to happen. And so it's your fault. I mean, that's how manipulators go. They shove it back over there, So anyway, and of course I'm not telling. I know exactly what I can say and can't say, and so I don't tell anything. I'm just like, even when they asked me the question, that the court ordered me to go to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, I'm like, gross, no, that's not
You didn't go to a therapist?
Oh yeah, they made me go, but I would never tell them
the truth.
anything. No, because I thought I would be vaporized. I mean, that was the threat to me if I didn't finish the mission. And what's being vaporized mean? Being steamed to death from the inside out, melting like your whole body, because it was supposed to destroy my soul and my body. I'd grown up with a very, very strong religious belief that we go on, that we live forever, that our souls do not get destroyed.
Yeah.
And we have our families, and we're together, in the eternities, and we just try to live a good life. That's what I believe. So the idea that because I was half alien, I had a different set of, like, this is what's true in your world, and this is what we grew up, you were taught, but it's not quite true, because this world has the ability to destroy both your body and your soul. That was the most terrifying part of my whole experience. I just can tell you. It was more terrifying than the abuse. It was more terrifying than any other thing that he ever used to manipulate me. The idea that I would cease to exist, both body and soul.
Do you have any baggage from? Okay, so first of all, I'm grew up Southern Baptist, charismatic, speaking in tongues, and great people. Some strange things that are not, and I don't, as a grown adult now, do not agree with. My wife's Catholic, so I became Catholic later. There's obvious things in the Catholic Church. We all have read the newspaper before, and we can know that what the Catholic Church is capable of at its worst. Are there things in the LDS Church that you blame this paranoia on? Like, did he use the belief system that was so scary for us? Because, by the way, the first thing I remember in my life was being in the bathtub with my mom and her telling me that if I died in my sleep, I was going to go to hell unless I had accepted Jesus into my heart. And I'm like, well, damn, I can die in my sleep. Number one.
First of all.
And then second of all, I'm like, okay, sign me up. Let's do this now. In my mom's defense, she was just trying for everyone to go to heaven. But that fear lived with me into my 30s. Literally, is there any part of you that blames the LDS Church for the fact that you were so susceptible to guilt?
Well, this is how I feel. I feel like almost in every religion, if you have a strong belief system that has a dogmatic approach to doctrine, like if you don't do this, this will happen, right, I think is a huge mistake.
I agree.
In every religious setting. So in my own, I was...
Because they're all different, by the way.
Yeah, they're all
Somebody's wrong,
different.
And either there's a lot of people in heaven or a lot in hell.
Yeah, no, there's
based on our
pretty
dogma.
much everybody's in heaven. This is what I believe. Because I, too, like you, I'm like, yeah, there's many, many things that I still, accept and I believe in and all of those things. But there are things that I'm like, and I'm the first person to stand up in church or Sunday school and go, oh, are we going to talk about this in the same way that we've always talked about it? Peace out. Love you guys. You're my neighbors and my friends. You're my tribe, but I'm leaving.
When a preacher starts telling me who is and isn't going to hell, I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm done. I don't need
you.
How do you? I wanted to stand up before and say, how the F do you know?
Right.
How do you know exactly who's going to? Please.
Exactly. You don't.
Button that shit and get it out of here.
You're human.
That has sent so many people away from God, by the way, that discussion. So
yeah, and I would love to have this discussion too, because we could take an hour on this. I definitely know that there are certain things. So in my own faith, in the the Mormon Church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they do teach things like, being sealed to your family in the temple, that seals your family like for time and all eternity. Whereas most marriages, the words are until death do you part. So that's one of those things where if you go to the temple and you hear the words for time and all eternity and you're kneeling across an altar that has mirrors on each wall and you can see the person, because I've been there before, I've been married in the temple, and you see the person and yourself for all eternity because the mirrors go forever. It's kind of a cool idea, like, oh, we're going to be together in the next life. We're going to have each other. We're going to have our family, whatever family we have. If we just try to, live the basic commandments and do the right things, and we're trying hard. The interesting thing about the LDS religion is that depending on who teaches you, I think you can have a different experience. Like my parents, because they were so non-judgmental, because they were so open, like our next door neighbors were from Iran. And he was a professor at the university, and they were at our house, and we were at their house, and they'd bring us baklava, and all the, we loved them, and we loved their two daughters, and Presbyterians, Methodists, Catholics, Greek Orthodox. I had friends from all of those religions. So even though, if you grow up in Utah where there's primarily Mormon people or your neighbors, active, inactive, whatever, then I think you might have a little different experience. Maybe you have more of that mindset, like it's either our way or the highway. But because I grew up in a home where my parents believed, and really I believe that that's in our doctrine too, that all people, it's just about trying to love the Savior. That was really the core, which is why they like us to use the Church of Jesus Christ, because we're not the Church of Joseph Smith, and we're not the Church of Mormon, the guy on the temple.
Joseph Smith had his problems.
Yeah, he did.
Let's not be worshiping men here, with anyone. Yeah,
exactly, and that's
but
why.
But all religions have some bugaboo.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is that those are the kinds of things that you have to know the people that are human beings, and maybe they were trying really hard to create a really good religion or whatever, and maybe they got off track here and they got off track there. But if it helps me be a better person, a kinder person, a more loving person, a more forgiving person, a person that will serve, which is what I try to do, then I'm like, okay, it's worked for me.
Which is the definition of being a Christian. You believe in Christ and you want to be those kind of people.
Yes.
And I am as well.
Yeah.
I just, what you said, boy, I want to, and I'm going to.
I have two other things too.
Yeah, the dogmatic, what did you say?
Doctrine.
When you have the dogmatic doctrine and this happens and I cause this and I cause this to happen.
Yeah.
Man, we get way off real quickly. And every single, by the way, I've been part of, I've swam in and out of everything.
Yeah.
More out than in.
Yeah.
I am so good with Jesus. But the dogmatic doctrine that every religion seems to bring in is a dangerous thing.
It's like, if you don't believe what we say is the truth, then you're not part of the club. You're not part. You don't have the right ticket to get into the best part of heaven.
I'm cool with you believe in that, but don't pray for my soul because I'm not. You have two more things. I don't want to.
Well, my main thing is that I found out. Now, this is as an adult and just recently. This is like within the time where a friend of the family, which just came out last October. It's only been out for a year. The 9-part series, and I got all of this stuff back, that the discovery, that from Abducted in Plain Sight and that amazing documentary that happened first, to what they also did in their discovery for the series. And so I get all of this information back. And in there, my sister, who's an attorney, my youngest sister, Susan, she's reading through and she goes, oh my gosh, Jan, you got to see this letter that's in here. So there's a letter in there. And I haven't really hardly talked about this, but I want to talk about it because I think it's really important, your question. And it's a letter where he had been disciplined by, it's got the church's letterhead, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that Ursula Berchtold is being disciplined by the church because of inappropriate behavior or actions with a minor female. And it's dated 10 months before my first kidnapping. Now, none of us had ever seen that. I just saw it. I mean, it just was a piece of discovery that I don't know who even found it. I don't know if it was Sky and Stephanie, who were the producers and filmmaker of the first documentary, Abducted in Plain Sight, or if it was this team, for the series, or the other documentary.
And once again,
Peacock.
what's worse than the crime is the cover-up.
Yeah. And
that's the problem I have. Not that a man would do something, and not that a Catholic priest would go, right, yes, but we cover it. When we cover it up, we're complicit.
That's my
problem, so those men are complicit.
So this is what's interesting, because when somebody confesses something now,
then it can't be holding against you.
If this weren't 1973 or whatever the date was on there, I think it was 1973. If this were to happen today, at least in my church, there would be a completely different response. Like now, it is mandated that if somebody confesses to something, or if another person comes in, and a girl, and says this happened or whatever, and they're trying to repent because they think they've done something wrong. See, in my case, our bishop in my little church was another one of my dad's best friend, because you're not a paid clergy in our church. You're just a volunteer. There's no paid clergy.
I like that.
So you just you're a volunteer for a period of time. Like you're asked, will you serve in this capacity as the the shepherd of this fold, the bishop of this ward. That's what it's called. And so that man and some other people, and then that woman over here with the women's organization, and over here I'm a young women's leader or teacher or whatever. You have different. I'm a Sunday school teacher, whatever they are. Those are called callings, but you only serve in that calling for a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, if some longer than others. My sister Susan was a primary.
They should do that with Congress, by the way. You only serve for. They should do that with Congress. You only serve for 3 years, and it's volunteer.
Yeah, and it's volunteer.
Yeah, you're serving your country.
I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be
You'll get
so
a real
good.
job, and then you can serve on as volunteer anyway.
Right. So anyway, that's kind of the setup. But now, if somebody in this day and age were to confess to something or whatever, you're supposed to call the authorities. I mean, it is mandatory within the religion to report. Back then, and even now, though, if somebody were to confess to being, like maybe they got you into some kind of business deal that they kind of knew was kind of shady and whatever, and then maybe they go and they talk to their ecclesiastical leader and say, I really kind of knew, and I really feel crummy about this, and man, my friends lost $500,000 because I got them to invest, and I don't know how to repent, I just want to feel better, kind of confessing to somebody. you don't go and publish that like in your church newsletter or something, right? And you really don't go and publish somebody's sexual crimes in a newsletter. They are to call the authorities, but still, nobody in that congregation, in any church that I've ever heard of, ever knows. And so, yeah, there's now a sex offender registry that people are supposed to be on, but even Berchtold, he had moved from Las Vegas, where he was on a sex offender registry. This is later in life. These are all stories post the second kidnapping, which I haven't even talked about yet. And he comes, to a little town in Logandale, Nevada, which is, closer to where I was living at the time. I had no idea he was living there with his new wife, whose 2 daughters ran away from home because he was abusing them. And so I know their names because they found us. The older daughter found us by calling all the Brobergs in the phone book. She found our little first self-published book.
Wow.
And so now I know that there's those 2, and I know of 2 others after me, and then the 2 before me. Those are just the names of the people that I know. I don't know how many others there were, because the FBI says 30 to 70 children will be perpetrated upon during the course of one pedophile's life that never goes to prison or is not cut off from children.
It's unbelievable. And the idea that after all this, and then you come home, you were not done being kidnapped is unbelievable. That's crazy. So I think this would be a good time because there's so much more I want to ask you. Take a break, you go to the bathroom and get a coffee, and then we'll do the second half. Is that cool? Because I'm fascinated.
So my other thing, before we leave this topic about religion, and my own included, is that there has to be a way for somehow to be able to... Because so often, perpetrators don't go to jail. It's like 1% of the people who even try to prosecute or bring their evidence to the state, and the state tries, they aren't convicted. So now you've got a perpetrator, and nobody knows.
They just leave a state.
Because the child went and told their ecclesiastical leader, my dad's doing this thing, but mom is like, I think she has an overactive imagination. This isn't happening. And yet, the bishop's like, I got to call the police anyway. And so, they do the thing. But then the police can't find anything because now the little kid won't talk, because that's what happens, because now they're getting more. And so what I'm saying is somehow, I don't know how this would work. I had all the BACA guys that came when I was doing a conference, and Berchtold had made threats against that university. They showed up at my house on their bikes and escorted my car to an event, because my dentist was a member of BACA, and he was the orthodontist for all my kids. He looked like you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I don't want some guy like me looking, I'm working on my teeth, that's for sure.
He was very cool. And so they came because they almost canceled me. Like, we can't let her speak because this man says she's made it all up, and he's going to throw a lawsuit on the university. And
then the rarest of occasions, I have a friend.
Yeah.
I can't go into any detail, but he is a good man. They're divorced. Mm-hmm. He lost a child. This wife has been committed before. Mm-hmm. She's absolutely mentally, emotionally unstable, has just made up things about him with his daughter that I know are made up, and it's gotten a big thing. And I'm like, oh God, that adds a whole nother wrinkle, because it is possible. And there are very, very few circumstances that someone's doing this. Yeah. And the church just has to be transparent. That's what they have to do.
And somehow, I don't know how you do that, because if the person doesn't get convicted, which hardly ever happens, and the occasional, very rare time, very rare, but it does happen, that somebody accuses because they're trying to get back at, the ex-husband,
usually from a mentally unstable or ill person themselves, right?
Yes, which really ruins the whole process for the rest of the children and men, women, boys, girls who were, it's 1 in 3 girls. It's 1 in 4 boys. They don't talk about it as much, that have had some kind of sexual exploitation, violence, rape, incest, trafficking before the age of 18.
1 in 4 boys.
Yes. And here we are in this room. And we fit the statistic in just this room.
We're 100% right here at the table.
Yep.
You think about it. And my, in my family.
1 in 3. Yeah. And you don't have enough men here, but you're the 1 in 4. Yeah. And me too. Okay. So your producer is also a survivor.
It's crazy.
People think this is just rare. This doesn't happen. I can't talk about it. I don't want to believe it. And it is everywhere.
Everywhere.
It is so common. So even though my story is really kind of outrageous in some ways, which is maybe why it went viral. I didn't know that my story would go viral in that documentary. I had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to help a few people because I had been asked to speak at a couple educational things and like some church meetings and like how do you overcome trials and how do you get on with your life and you know, a few, one was a psychiatric conference about, you know, and I did it for free. I mean, I never got paid or anything. I just would go and tell my story once I realized I had something to say and that people got something out of it. I was, at first, when my very first friend, and I just had my baby, who's now 34, and I'm carrying him around, and I'm 27 years old, and I'm carrying him around in the little you know, the little thing, the little car carrier, and I was working at Disney World, singing and dancing for Mickey Mouse, doing what I do. I love to do my stuff, and I had a friend who also worked there as an actress, entertainer. She had a little book club, and she said, will you just come and tell my book club about your story? And I was like, I don't know anything. I don't have, what would I tell them? I don't have a book or, you know, because I didn't have any of that. She goes, no, just telling your story will really help people. It just helps people understand, you know, like because she had a child too, a little boy about the same age as my son, but most of the other people, the women at the thing, they were playing, you know, the princess or the dancer or the whatever. They didn't even have kids, but they asked me certain questions. And when I walked out of there, I was like, I think I have something important to say.
Oh God, yes.
That it's not a scary stranger, it's somebody you know, and that grooming, what is grooming? How does it happen? And it's not just happening to the child, it's happening to you, to the parent, to whoever is in the way of them getting access to that child. And so I knew those two things. I wanted to make it kind of my purpose in life was to make sure that the whole world, by the time that I'm 6 feet under, knows those two things and realizes that I'm telling the truth.
Well, so, you're doing it, and the ripple effect that we talk about a lot, the ripple effect. I don't think you have any idea, or I have any idea, how many of these things are probably not going to happen just based on their TV series and your documentary, because parents will go, oh my God, yeah, let me stop this before it starts, and I will bet you that it's prevented way more than you would think. Just what you've done. It's amazing. It's amazing what you've done. All right, let's take a little break, get a little coffee.